The first step is to download your pattern. Select your file according to your paper format and the size you wish to make. Print your pattern at 100% scale. There is a scale test included in the instructions to ensure you have printed correctly. Trim along the thin black border and use clear sticky tape to stick your pattern together. There is a layout included in the instructions to help stick all the pieces together correctly. Cut around each individual pattern piece and then lay your pattern pieces onto the fabric, following the individual cutting directions on each piece. There is a layout plan included in the instructions to help you lay the pattern onto the fabric. Pin the centre front pieces together along the straight edge. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock and press well with the iron. Place the middle front piece on top of the centre front piece, matching up along the curved edge. Match the notches along the way to ensure the correct edges are together. Pin in place and stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock and press the seam allowance closed with the iron. Repeat this for the other side. Place a side front piece on top of the middle front piece, matching up along the curved edge. Match the notches along the way to ensure the correct edges are together. You'll be pinning and stitching just to the waist notch, and this notch is marked on your pattern. Pin in place and stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can see I've stopped at the waist seam notch. Overlock this seam, running off the overlocking where you have finished up your stitching. Repeat this for the other side. Match the centre back piece with the side back piece. You'll be pinning and stitching just until the waist notch that is marked on the pattern. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you can see I've stopped at the waist notch. Overlock this seam, running off the overlocking where you have finished up your stitching. Repeat this for the other side so that you have a pair. Place the back pieces on top of the front piece with the right sides touching one another. Match up along the shoulder seam. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam open and there's no need to overlock this seam. Set the main pieces aside for now while we get to work on the lining. There are two options for the lining. If you wish to add a tulle petticoat layer like I am in this video, cut to the shorter line marked on the pattern. If you prefer no tulle, cut to the longer line. Now we essentially repeat all the steps we have just completed, but this time for the lining. Match the centre front pieces together, pinning along the straight edge. To save myself time, I've also pinned the middle front and side front pieces together, all in the one step. There is no need to stop at the waist notch, just stitch the entire seam together, top to bottom. While you're here, you can also pin together the centre back piece and the side back piece, matching your notches up along the way, and then repeat for the other side. Stitch all of these pieces together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock all of these seams closed. Follow these next steps if you wish to add boning to your dress. I have used 6 mm or 1/4 inch Rigoline flexible sew-in boning. Pin the boning onto the front and back bodice panel seams. The boning should begin 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch below the top edge and finish at the waist notch that's indicated on the pattern. You'll be top stitching along the boning directly down the centre of the seam to secure it neatly and blindly in place. If you'd prefer, you can also stitch the boning just into the seam allowance. If you've got another method that you prefer to use, go for it. When cutting the boning, make sure you round the edges with your scissors to prevent any sharp and uncomfortable edges when you're wearing your dress. I'll be placing boning into my 2 outer seams on the front and along the seam of my back pieces. I won't be adding any boning to right down the centre front of my dress. Stitch right along the centre of the seam to secure the boning in place. Place the back pieces of the lining on top of the front pieces of the lining with the right sides touching one another and matching along the shoulder seam. Pin in place. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. There's no need to overlock this seam and you can press the seam open with the iron. Place the lining pieces on top of the main pieces with the right sides touching one another. You'll be pinning along the neckline and the armhole curves. Make sure all of your notches are matching up together and use a lot of pins to secure in place. Stitch along the neckline and the armhole seams using a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Using a pair of snips or a small pair of scissors, clip into the curves around the armholes and the neckline. Take care not to snip into any of the stitching. This step is very important as once we pull the garment through to the right side, it will help everything sit really neat and flat and give you a very professional finish, so don't skip this step. Once everything is clipped, pull the garment through to the right side and press well along the armholes and the neckline. You can see I've started from the front and I'm pulling the back through the front piece. Open out the side seams and match the main front pieces together at the sides, all the way through to the lining. Stitch the seam all in one go using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then repeat for the other side seam. Overlock both of your side seams. Give your side seams a very thorough press and turn the whole garment back through to the right side. Now we'll be gathering the lower skirt piece along the top edge. Using the longest stitch on your sewing machine, stitch along the top edge. Be sure not to back tack on either end as we want to be able to pull the threads down. Also, make sure you leave a long tail end at each end so you have some thread to pull to create the gathers. We will be gathering this piece small enough to fit onto the skirt yoke piece, the small little piece. You can see I keep checking along the way to make sure it is the right size. You also want to make sure that you've folded the yoke piece in half as indicated on the fold line on the pattern and it is well pressed. Pin the yoke piece on top of the skirt side piece. Stitch together all along the top edge to secure all of the layers together. Now we'll be attaching the skirt side piece to the main dress. Match the lower skirt side piece to the lowest edge of the bodice side seam with the yoke piece sandwiched in between. Pin in place and stitch all layers together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock this seam closed and then repeat for the other side. Next, it is time to stitch the remainder of the dress closed. We'll be picking up from the stitching where we left off at the waist notch. Stitch from the waist notch all the way through to the hem on the front and back for both sides of the dress. Overlock the seams closed. If you're making the tulle petticoat, take your 4 cut pieces and stitch them together to form one long piece, open at either end. Using the longer stitch on your sewing machine, stitch along the top edge of the tulle band. Don't back tack on either end and make sure you leave a long tail end of thread at either end so we can pull to gather down. Pull the threads to gather the tulle piece small enough to fit along the bottom edge of the lining. Pin the tulle onto the lowest edge of the lining. The right sides should be touching so that the seam allowance is not against the body, otherwise this might be a bit uncomfortable to wear. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and then overlock this seam. Overlock the centre back edges of the garment, each one separately. Now it is time to insert the zipper. Open the invisible zipper and pin each side of the zipper tape to the centre back edge. Stitch each side of the zipper down using the invisible zipper foot attachment on your sewing machine. Keep as close to the zipper teeth as possible. Stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You want the zipper teeth to finish in line with the top edge of the dress. The zipper tape will be hanging over the top edge for about 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch. Pin the seam below the base of the zipper closed. The right sides of the garment will be touching. Stitch from the base of the zipper to the hem edge using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Turn down the top edge of the zipper tape and tuck it underneath the centre back seam allowance. Use a hand sewing needle to secure the zipper tape in place along the top edge. Fold the main hem edge upwards by 6 mm or 1/4 of an inch and press well. Repeat this so that the raw edge is now completely enclosed within itself. Press well and top stitch all the way around the hem to neatly secure it. If you chose not to make the petticoat option, you'll also need to repeat this step for the hem of the lining. If you did make the petticoat, you can just leave the tulle edge raw. Place one pair of ties on top of one another with the right sides together. Pin along the short edge and stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Fold the tie in half lengthways with the right sides touching one another. Stitch around the outer edge, leaving a 5 cm or 2 inch opening to turn the tie through to the right side. Once the tie is all the way through, give the tie a very good press with the iron. Top stitch the opening close using a straight stitch right up against the edge. Then repeat all this for the other tie.